if I'm standing on stage, I could talk to 1,000 people and not feel nervous. But when I get off stage at the end and I talk to one person, I'm more nervous then. For some reason, it's like a weird thing I have. I think you get better work if you have that particular kind of confidence and courage, which is something I need to work on. I know there's no magical answer to it. You just have to risk every time and try and fail sometimes, and that's how it works, right?
Sean Tucker is back on the podcast. In a previous episode, we talked about his book, The Meaning in the Making. This time we met in Cologne, Germany, where he was to give a talk about what it means to lead a creative life. In a way, that is also what we talked about in this interview. It's all about what it means to make meaningful work, how to deal with creative challenges, venture into new projects, and evolve as an artist. At the end, we also tackle the question of how AI might change photography. It was a real pleasure to sit down personally with Sean, and I always enjoy his philosophical way of approaching photography instead of obsessing over gear. The camera is just a tool that we have to master, and but then the question is, what are we going to use it for? And of that, Sean also reminds us in this interview. He reminds us to ponder our reasons why we pick up a camera. He says, what are you building and why? And think long term. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Halfway through, you'll hear a snippet of the audio that comes with the first issue of Sean's new magazine called Parable. So that's a real treat. And thank you very much, Sean, that you agreed to have this published in this interview. In case you haven't done already, please check out Sean's YouTube channel, subscribe to it, and of course, get a copy of his book, The Meaning in the Making. Both are tremendous resources if you want to grow as an artist and storyteller. You'll find all the links in the show notes, or go to the website at Gate7, that is spelled Gate and then Sieben, SIEBEN.de/podcast/Sean-Tucker. If you're a first-time listener of the Gate 7 podcast and like what you hear, please check out the other interviews I did in English. As I mentioned, there are 2 previous episodes with Sean Tucker, and in addition to that, you also find interviews and talks with Steve McCurry, Nick Brand, National Geographic photographer Eric Vallee, street photographer Valérie Jardin, humanitarian photographer David Duchemin, and many more. And now, sit back and enjoy my conversation with Sean Tucker. Okay, Sean, we could have actually had this recording going a little bit before. We've been talking for about 3-4 hours now in a cafe, but there were quite some ambient noises, so we went to a quieter place to have some better audio quality. First, thank you very much for taking the time. It's been great getting to know you in person. We talked on Zoom before, but now it's even better to do this interview in person.
Yeah, no worries. It's been a good morning.
Yeah. We've been walking around in Cologne a little bit. You got here to promote your book. You have a reading tonight here in Cologne, and then you move on to Hamburg. How did that come about, this idea of doing a little book tour?
I think because when you write stuff, you do it in a little bit of isolation, like you're just sitting at home at a keyboard, and then you're putting your ideas down, but you're wondering, does anyone really care, or does this mean anything to people? So I think the idea of now going around and almost doing a piece of the book as a talk live with an audience gives you an idea of what you've got as well. So, on the one side, it's definitely practical because it gets out there and helps me to sort of talk about the book a bit and hopefully makes more people interested and want to pick the book up. So there's a little bit of marketing is part of the reason, but it's good for me too, because you get like live feedback and people telling you, I really connected with this, or can you explain that a bit more? That kind of, it lets you know what you've got more when you see the work that you produce bounce off real people, which is great.
Yeah, I get that real feedback. You've done some readings in the UK. What were kind of the questions that came at that events? What did people want to know from you, or what did they want to talk about?
It's funny, this one, because like the talk is almost, it's almost set up in such a way that it's difficult to ask questions afterwards, because it's trying to be quite motivational, so that by the end of it, it sort of lands like the end of a film lands. Like, okay, I've got some things to think about, rather than I've got a question because there's lots of information. So it's been an interesting reaction. Often people want to give some of their own stories afterwards. They'll want to say, oh yeah, that really connected with me because this happened to me, and they'll share something of themselves, which is kind of nice, because then you're in a space together talking about how we're all journeying together with creativity. But I think probably the most asked question is around motivation and how to stay inspired. I think that's the thing that people struggle with the most. How do I work out what I'm going to say, and how do I keep the energy and the motivation up enough to go out every day with a camera, or whatever your creativity is, to sit down and type at a keyboard every day? How do you keep that up? Is something people struggle with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's also a topic that you yourself are struggling with, even in the byline or the subtitle of your book. It says it's a biographical kind of guide. You share lots of your own struggles, your own challenges, and we've also been talking about that today here in Cologne. That on the one hand, your environment is very crucial to your creativity. Now you moved to a very rural area, and what kind of impact has that had on your own workflow, your own creativity in the past month?
It's probably been the last 2 years, things have shifted a lot. So moving to sort of a quieter part of the countryside, it's different now. And I knew my photography would change moving out of London, and the things I wanted to shoot would change, and the stories I wanted to tell. But it's almost like you have to start at the beginning, which is frustrating. Like it's very easy when you're photographing to just stick to the one thing that you're known for, that's getting some attention, and just to milk it for as many years as you can. But you also know, if you're honest with yourself, that you're kind of just playing it safe and you're not growing. So having to start from scratch again is difficult, but I know it's good, and I know it's what needed to happen. So I'm trying to work out how to tell new stories in a different part of the world, and it's not going well, is the truth. Like it's been really difficult. I've started a project when I first got up to Yorkshire that I said to you this morning, like I shot for 9 months. I got 3 photographs. Like that's how difficult it was. And it wasn't to do with my skill as a photographer. It's to do with access and getting people to participate in a story that you want to tell. That's where I've realized I need to do work now, because I'm not good at that. And I think it's what a lot of photographers underestimate. Like you could spend hundreds of hours on YouTube tutorials, and you can spend a lot of money on fancy camera gear, and you can be quite technically skilled and still have no idea how to get the images that you want to get, because the missing piece is how to get out into the world now and engage with the world and get those photographs in real life. And we can't spend our whole lives just playing with the technical stuff and fiddling with, cameras because they're fun to play with. You have to work out what are you going to point it at, and that's now the next part. Because I think, and I said this to you this morning, I think I've got like a lot of standalone images. Like no one would say, oh, you don't have any photography. I've got a lot of photography, but I don't have a body of work anywhere in that. And I don't have something that I'm trying to say in all of that. And it's time to grow up for me. It's time to stop messing around and put in the work like the greats have done, to go to a place to tell a story, or to dig in for a number of years on a particular topic and try and produce a body of work. So that's the next stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's it's very healthy to look at it in your own development, to look at it like a journey with different stages that you're in. You embark on a journey with your camera. There's some things you have to learn along the way. First, master your craft, master the camera, but then I think the more comfortable you are with the technical side, this question creeps in more and more. What do I actually want to tell?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't regret any of my journey so far. I think it's taken the right course, and I'm grateful for lots of it. So starting out, it was photographing anything, and then it was sort of natural light portraits with friends and that kind of thing. And then maybe it was getting into product photography, which taught me a load of technical skills. I'm really grateful for that, because it taught me how to create good light and recognize good light and work in editing and all the rest of it. Like I understand that world now because of that process. And then getting into street photography was great, and playing with light and shadow especially. Like that's been a really good key part of my journey and added to the skills, and then really digging on the portraits and learning how to shoot portraits in studios and those kind of things. There's loads of different technical skills I built up along the way. But now at this stage of my life, sitting here for the last few years going, okay, I have all this. What am I doing with it? It's funny, isn't it? Because you can write a book like the book I've written, and you still need to learn from your own book. You know, like I'm writing about putting meaning into your work, and I'm not writing about it because I've worked it out. I'm writing about it because I know it's the next stage of my journey that I need to really work on. And we used to have a saying when I was at seminary that you preach best what you need to hear the most. So that for me is like, I think I'm able to talk about this stuff in a way that really lands because I'm in the middle of that struggle. I haven't got it all figured out, and I'm in my later years yelling back about how to do it. I'm in it with you. I'm no better than you. I'm trying to sort this out.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so relatable. I think we all have to figure these things out ourselves. I mean, there's no manual that you can take and run with. There's no one size fits all. I mean, as a photographer, you have to find your own voice. You develop your own voice, and I think in that vein, it's often more important to hear the questions and to see someone else struggling with the same things that you are struggling with, and be like a companion along the way.
Yeah, I mean, when I used to work for the church, I was quite strong on the fact that I think we should be honest about our doubts, right? Which is not a popular thing to talk about, right? Because you're supposed to. I used to stand up on a Sunday night because the people I spoke to mostly were teens and young adults, and I thought, like, you can't lie to them and say like, oh no, I believe all this stuff and this is the way that it works. When I definitely have doubts, and they know that, they can see that, and they have doubts, right? You have to be more honest than that. So I used to stand up on a Sunday and say, there's a lot of this stuff I'm not sure about, and I haven't worked it out, and I'm not even sure I believe all of this. I'm still trying to work through it. And every Monday morning I would get emails from the congregation, some of the older crowd, saying, as a leader, you're not allowed to say that. You can't talk about your doubts. And I thought that the argument I used to use with them was, I think doubt is essential for faith, not the opposite. So I used to use this illustration where I used to say, if you die and you go to heaven and there's a literal God there, I don't think that's how it works, but imagine that's the case, right? Do you need faith anymore? And they've all gone like, no, because it's right there, it's right in front of you, right? I'm like, okay, so exactly. So you can only have faith when you have doubt. You have to have both together, so we have to be honest about our doubts. So then years later, when I became a photographer and started doing YouTube, I thought the same has to apply. I can't pretend I have no doubts or like I have all the answers and have it all worked out, because it's a lie and it's not helpful to people. So if I'm going to talk about how to be a photographer or how to work out things on your creative journey, I'm going to be vulnerable about, I'm not sure about this. This didn't work for me. This is the mistakes that I made, as much as I talk about the successes, because that's something that's relatable to people. I got really tired early on with photography, watching YouTube videos with photographers who were pretending they were super successful and they had loads of clients and everything. And I just realized it was marketing, because most of them were gone in 6 months because they weren't telling the truth, or they were at least hyping it up, which made starter photographers like me feel like I'm failing because look how successful they are and how much I'm struggling. They were also struggling. They weren't being honest about it. And I never wanted to fall into that trap. I thought it's important to be honest about all the mess of it, right? Because that's relatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. This project that you started in the church and taking these portraits, I don't know if it's at a stage where you want to talk about it, but I think it's really, really interesting and a good illustration of what we were talking about, all the doubts you can bring to a project or the challenges that you encounter. Can you share a little bit what's kind of what your experiences have been so far along the way, and what are the things that you are currently struggling with taking it further?
Yeah, so the idea with the church project was when I moved up to Yorkshire, which is a part of the world where there are a lot of old churches, but they are empty because, there's very few people going anymore. But they're these beautiful old buildings. I thought there was a really interesting story to tell around the people who keep those places going now. And obviously with my history with the church, it's something that I'm connected to. This was a big part of it, was I realized that if I'm going to do a long-term project, it should, I think, be something that's connected to my story somewhere, because it makes it more interesting. Because I think as a photographer, we pretend. I mean, I'm not a journalist, right? So I'm not trying to be super objective. I want to tell a story that's somehow connected to mine, and where it got messy for me and where that institution is today. Somewhere in the mix of that, I didn't have answers, but I think that's an interesting question to start with. And I went in thinking this is going to be good. People are going to want to do this. When they're going to see the images, they're going to be very impressed. It's going to, there'll lots of recommendations. I'll soon have loads of images. But I got a lot of resistance, a lot of suspicion about what are these for? Why are you taking these images? Why do you want to do this? And because I'm a coward, like I don't respond well to like that, and I think I just retreated. I took 3 portraits I was really happy with. I made prints of those portraits, took them back to the people, asked them to recommend me on to other people. But the church is in a difficult spot in my country right now. They're dying, and they know they are. They're very insecure about it, and they're worried about any attention that you pay to it, because are you trying to shame them or embarrass them, which is really not what I'm trying to do. But why should they believe me, right? They don't have to. So those were all the roadblocks I hit. I spent a lot of time, a lot of teas with priests, sitting like talking about the projects. I went to a lot of services in churches, which I haven't done for years, to try and gain some trust. And I just realized like I'm going to have to put in more time than it's worth to create these images because of the level of suspicion. So I've kind of realized, again, I know it in theory, but now I know it in practice, is I might have a lot of skills, but if I can't get access, I'm not going to be able to make the work I want to make. So I don't have answers yet. I just know that I've failed in that so far. So I haven't done any work on this project for a year because it just hit a brick wall. So I've got 3 portraits sitting on a hard drive. Who cares? And I need to now adjust and move. I either need to try a different approach with that, or change it to a different story to tell, or something. But at the moment, it only feels like failure at the moment. Yeah.
Questions at this point, but I think this is something that many photographers are struggling with. They get to the same point where they started a project and they hit a roadblock, and now the question is, should I carry on doing this, pursuing it, or should I stop doing it and invest my energy and time in something else?
Yeah, so for me on this one, I just felt like I don't, and this is really personal, so it's not something to be copy and pasted, but I felt like I don't want to do this sort of work unless it's collaborative. So if the community that I'm trying to make images with and tell a story with are resistant to that and don't want to do it, I don't want to keep pushing through and making them uncomfortable because I want to do a project with them. I get the message. They're very nice about it. No one's been rude, but I get the message they're not keen, they're not sure, they're uncomfortable. I'm not the kind of personality that's going to pressure through with that. Somebody else might, right? There's no right or wrong. In fact, I kind of wish I was the other person because I get the images, but just for me right now, I'm not happy to do that. So that's my answer. I need to switch, right? I need to move somewhere else unless I can find a different approach that they're more keen to engage with. But that's the reason I say it's not a copy and paste answer is because I think that's not how great work is necessarily made. Like if you look at people who've told great stories, they didn't take no for an answer and they did keep pushing in their own way. And I really respect that. So don't take my cowardice as a solution. Is not, but that's definitely the approach I've taken.
Yeah, I think you at that point you have to listen to your intuition or something, or your inner voice, what it's telling you. I mean, there's no right and wrong. I think you have to make a decision to keep on working on it or move your attention to different subject, and maybe somewhere along the line something happens that brings you back on track with that project. That's also something that sometimes these little coincidences or like connections we make along the way, and then it all makes click, and then you can break through to the other side of the wall that you're hitting right now.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope that's how it works. Yeah.
I saw the portraits that you took, and they're beautiful. And I wish you find a way to pursue that project, or maybe change directions, or approach it from a different angle. It'd be really interesting to see that. And
yeah, I've got some more ideas to try, but I think it's. I also have to be realistic.
Yeah.
And I think if I've tried these other ideas that I have in the next few months and that doesn't work, I think it's time to move on, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Oh. Yeah, but this creative journey and finding or developing as a photographer, this is, I think, like from interviews I've seen or I've listened to on other podcasts of you lately, watching your YouTube channel, this is something that seems to be on your mind. Like you're looking for not a new direction, but like asking a lot of questions to which direction to take. This project is one part of it. You've published the first edition of a new magazine style, Parable. Let's talk about that a little bit. How does that fit in your all the questions that you're asking yourself at this time?
It's kind of the same thing. It's kind of me trying to grow up as a photographer. So I realized until now, the last 5 years before this year, I put out a book at the beginning of every year just called Collections. So it's Collections 1 through 5. And it was just, in each book was 90 images, 45 color, 45 black and white from the previous year. There was no theme. There wasn't really any writing. I took out some quotes from some of the videos, but otherwise it was just the images. I obviously worked to try and sequence them so the flow was good, but it was just whatever I saw in that year. And I think towards the end, I started to think to myself, I'm being lazy. You know, I'm not pushing myself as a photographer to tell stories with sets of images or bodies of work. And so then I'd written The Meaning in the Making, which I really enjoyed as an exercise in actually, this is me saying something. This is me like talking about something that I think is important. And that came out, and then I sort of had these two things in each hand, like a book of just random photographs and a book of quite deliberate writing. And I thought, how do I bring these two things together? And I thought, well, maybe the answer is a magazine where I use collections of images around a theme, and then use that theme to talk about things that I think are important. So the first edition, the first Parable magazine, is about window light, where I've taken some new images and incorporated some older images in this theme of window light, and then spoken through the magazine, starting with the photography. What is window light? How do we shoot it? Why do we find that interesting? The fact that aperture is a synonym for window, and we've got a window in our hands in a camera that floods light onto a sensor. That's quite interesting. To moving through to some of the psychological or philosophical ideas about how do we take light from outside and flood it onto our interiors when we're struggling, or use our lives as ways to flood light onto the interiors of others. So every and you know, people who've watched my YouTube channel will get this as a model, if you like. I've made videos in the same sort of way. You know, when I made a video talking about embracing your shadows, that starts with photography, talking about exposing for your highlights and having dark shadows, but it moves through at the end to talking about how do we embrace shadows we pass through in our lives. How do we take those as opportunities to grow and forge ourselves and shape ourselves? So this idea of using photography, and that's why the magazine is called Parable, because a parable is, you know, using something as a story or a metaphor to talk about something deeper. So every Parable magazine will be an exercise in taking or making images around a theme to talk about something deeper. And that's a format which I think then gives me an opportunity to exercise more deliberate writing and photography together in a publication. And that, I think, will teach me skills I need in the long run.
Yeah, it's a brilliant format that you've come up with. You combine the digital with the analog. You can get a printed copy of the magazine, but you can also buy a digital one, and you add audio to it. So it's very across the different mediums that are at your disposal. And it's a great combination. And I told you, coming here today on the train, I was listening to the audio, looking at the magazine on my iPad, and it's a really great experience.
Great, thank you. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and this combination that you always bring the photography world together with philosophical thoughts, and it really works in this format. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, cool.
It's really great. How often is it gonna come out? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so I'll probably do minimum 2 a year, but I might do 3 or 4. It kind of depends on what happens in that year or what stories I manage to tell. Some things take longer to put together than others, but I've given myself the target of at least every 6 months I'll release one.
And now, please enjoy a short snippet of the audio that comes with the first issue of Sean's new magazine, Parable.
Parable by Sean Tucker. Window light. A parable is a simple story or analogy offered to illustrate a moral or spiritual lesson. When I first got into street photography, I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be the sort of photographer who ran around after people trying to capture the perfect moment with the most interesting human subjects. As much as I respect and admire the work of those hunters of human moments, I had neither the courage nor the drive for that kind of work. Traditionally speaking, street photography has always been defined by candid images of human beings acting or interacting in daily life. But my shyer, more introverted nature saw me drawn to the in-between spaces in our cities, and the light and shadow which plays there. Human beings feature in my images, of course, but rather than attempting to capture the unguarded moments between identifiable individuals, I tended to use people for scale rather than overt story, and I was drawn to framing hints of human life, which offered looser narratives, often with more questions than answers. For some, that means I don't neatly fit into the category of street photographer, which, for the record, I happily accept. If you allow me to keep making the work which makes me happy, I'm fine with whatever label you want to apply to it, or whichever box you want to put me in. Just let me keep shooting the subject which brings me joy. And that subject is light itself. Its absence in the shaped shadows which lurk in alleyways and hang on our city walls, or its blazing presence as it drifts through our windows to light our interior worlds.
And now, back to the interview.
Well, switching topics a little bit, today when you walked to the cafe where we met, did you have your camera on you? Did you take it with you?
Yeah, I did. It didn't come out well. I took it out of my bag in a church, but other than that, it stayed because it's a very grey Cologne day.
Yeah. I thought so. Like you're known for your contrasty shots, light and shadow, and this is really not a perfect day for your style of photography.
Yeah, I don't often shoot on days like this. My camera often stays in my bag, especially. I mean, at the moment I'm traveling with my Sony, but normally I have the Ricos on me, the little GRs, and I mean, honestly, the Ricos are great cameras, but they're very, very limited use. Like, I can only use those when the light is out. If not, they stay in a bag, and I'll use a longer focal length on the Sony or something so I can separate subjects with a shallow depth of field. But if everything is flat and grey and the light is very even, having a wider angle on a point and shoot doesn't really cut it for me. It doesn't do what I want it to do. So, yeah, I am kind of quite specific. It's great light for portraits though. Like this would be a good portrait day, and I'd maybe do something with that. But for street photography, I often don't bother. I'll just walk around and see and enjoy a city instead.
Yeah, yeah. Have you done some street portraits or?
No, I'm we were talking about this morning. Like my street photography very rarely features people in a recognizable way, and I don't approach people for street portraits because I don't want to. I don't know. I don't want to feel like I'm imposing on people, and that's not something that anyone else should feel judged who does it. I know some people who do it and do it very well. But my portrait work, I am probably first and foremost a portrait photographer in terms of skill set. So I love portraits, but that's because people come to me asking for portraits. So it's a collaboration that someone else starts, and I'm happy to engage with. But I don't push myself on people that I find in the street to take those images. It's just not in my personality, really.
Is it the same? Like you have lots of experience talking in front of crowds. You work in the church, and now you're giving these talks, and you feel apparently comfortable in that kind of situation. But is it because people are there for a reason?
Yeah.
And you don't have to introduce yourself as a photographer, ask something from others?
Yeah, because they're there because you put out an invite and they came and said, yes, I want to come to that. That's very easy because everyone knows the deal in the room. You know, me walking up to somebody on the street and saying, hey, I've got something important I really think you should listen to. I'd be like, what am I doing? Like, why am I bothering this person with because I think I've got good thoughts. I would never do that. But yeah, it's always been, I mean, I am an introvert. So there's part of me that doesn't want to put myself in people's way in any given day. There's another weird aspect about it, though, that I was talking to a friend the other day and saying I'm more comfortable standing on a stage. If I'm standing on a stage, I could talk to 1,000 people and not feel nervous. But when I get off stage at the end and I talk to one person, I'm more nervous then. For some reason, it's like a weird thing I have. So I think the more I'm in someone's face directly, the more difficult I find that for some reason. But if people are there because they said they want to be there because you said you were going to be doing something, I don't mind that at all. That's great. I think it's more, maybe it's being overly British and feeling like you're imposing on people or getting in people's way or bothering somebody. I think that's definitely part of that psyche or personality. All our culture creeps into the back of our head somewhere and sits there, and I think there's probably some of that.
Okay. Yeah. But would you like to be a little bit more extrovert?
I'd like to be more comfortable with engaging with people who didn't ask for it. I don't know. I'm not going to be a loud person ever or life of the party, and I don't want to be that. I'm not interested in being that. But I would like to, especially like we were talking about today, you know, you're doing projects and your background in journalism means you're far more comfortable just engaging with people out and about and not feeling too, you know, like you're getting in somebody's way for that. You're happy to ask. I'd like to be happier to ask to make portraits with people or tell stories with people out and about when they didn't ask for it. That is a skill I'd like to have more, or a comfort I'd like to have more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is that something that are there places where you feel more comfortable doing that, going out and be a little bit more open towards people and look for that kind of encounters and have them? Or is it doesn't matter in which place you are?
It doesn't matter. It'd be great I'd love to be the kind of photographer who, no matter where I'm traveling, like if I'm here in Cologne now and I see, you know, I don't know, kids graffitiing a wall or something like that, to be able to go up and say, hey, can I just make a bunch of photographs and come back with a little photo story of this? And be able to engage wherever you are in the world, I think would be great, you know, and be that loose with it, be that confident with yourself and loose with it. But I'm still not. I don't want to bother these guys. I don't want to have to explain what I'm doing. I don't want them to have to trust me that I have good intentions. I'd rather just have a quiet coffee somewhere and read a book. You know, I think you get better work if you have that particular kind of confidence and courage, which is something I need to work on. I know there's no magical answer to it. You just have to risk every time and try and fail sometimes, and that's how it works, right? There's no secret.
Yeah. There's no secret. You said that you have to work on that. Is there anything that you think that will bring you there, other than just, getting yourself into that kind of situations and making the experience and having to live with the rejection and
it's the experience, right? It is. Every time. Like I've done little things. Like I did a portrait project with the Himba tribe in Namibia a few years ago. That was one of those steps for me, of me going, I need to try this. Trying to do this church project recently has been another attempt at that's failed. I've got another project now which I'm looking to try and start as well, with a different subculture near where I live. And it is, I'm asking for access. I'm trying to meet people again. I am trying. I just know that it cuts against the grain of my personality and probably takes more effort. And when I get those rejections, it hits a bit harder. I have to sort of pull myself up and go, this isn't about you, which I'm sure a lot of people will relate to that feeling. But it's not an excuse not to try, right? I still know I have to give it a go.
Yeah, but there's these attempts in the past, and you've made these steps, and I think in the long run they will all add up, and you'll get to the place where you want to be. I mean, it's also a choice. Like, I mean, some photographers they just don't feel the need to be more open and extroverted. I mean, if you don't feel that way, there's no need to pursue something like that.
Yeah, and I do want to do that sort of work, so I do have to try, right? So, my dream coming up was always, I wanted to be a National Geographic star photographer. And I think in my head I thought, when they get commissioned to do these stories, I mean, not that this job exists anymore, it's gone, but like back in the day when they got to do those stories, somebody else organized everything for them, and they just walked in with a camera and everyone was super happy to see them. But that's not how it worked. Of course it's not. When I think about it, they had to go and ask and find people who would help them get access. They had to have all those skills. No one did it for them. There wasn't like some shoot producer who ran along going, we've organized a shoot portrait with this person at 10:30. We just need to be there. And you can just swan in like some celebrity and take a portrait. You had to get access. You had to find the people and ask the people. And I think realizing that means if I want to do that sort of work in my own world, that kind of documentary storytelling stuff, I'm going to have to learn how to do that. And it's less about knowledge and more about courage, right? And choices. Make the choice to do it.
Just recently, I was talking to Samuel, who also has a YouTube channel. You know Samuel, Samuel Street Life. And we were also talking about this topic, developing as a photographer and, thinking of what kind of photographer I want to be and which steps to take. And Samuel said something that, or he raised a question. He didn't have a ready answer to that, but he said that sometimes I ask myself what kind of photographer I would have been without YouTube, or would have been a better photographer without YouTube. Have you ever asked yourself the same question?
Yeah, definitely. And the answer is yes, because it's more to do with how you split your time and how much capacity you have for the photography. We said today, we were talking earlier, and I said, you asked if I was doing any filming while I'm here. And I said no, because sometimes I really like to just travel and just focus on the photography now. Because I used to try and go, I'm going to go to a city, I'm going to make a video, and I'm going to do some photography. And what would happen is filmmaking takes up a lot more time than photography does. And photography takes a lot of exploration time as well as making actual images. And I can't do both well. I can do both half. So I think all those trips I've taken and made videos with, this is why I make a lot of videos from home now, just sitting on the couch, and it's more like a talk when I'm not making documentaries on other photographers, because I can do that as easily at home, and then when I do travel, I can focus on making better photography. And when I go to a city now, if I'm there for 3 or 4 days, all that time can be making images. So sometimes I think back in my head, like to all these places I've been and the images I made, and how I could have a much better portfolio of images now if all that time was spent making images. And I know a lot of people who do both think this way. Like I've got a friend who lives close to me in Yorkshire, Simon Baxter, who's a fantastic woodland photographer. He's brilliant. And he does YouTube as well, but he doesn't have a schedule. He'll make a video when he has the time and the motivation, but photography is his main thing. So most of the time when he goes out, he does not make videos, because he says like he wants to be remembered as a great photographer who made an occasional YouTube video than a great YouTuber who made some occasional photographs. He's clear on his priorities. And that really stuck with me. I thought, yeah, I really need to be thinking the same. I need to be making space for the photography, and making sure I'm giving myself as much time as possible to make great images. And the videos, I understand that they build an audience for me and support me as an artist, which I'm really grateful for. But the balance needs to be with making the work first, not building the audience. And that's a shift I have to make, I think. So I'm 100% with Samuel.
Yeah, interesting. I feel the same. Like I don't have a YouTube channel, but this podcast, and it's also like I've asked myself the question because there's lots of time that goes into the production of things, and you have to do things that are not inherently creative or don't have anything to do with the stories you want to tell. So there's always this kind of a struggle, between the two sides, and to make enough room for both things. And sometimes it's hard. Yeah,
it's always hard. It's always hard. And it comes down to deciding your priorities. What are you first? And in my case, it's slightly different, because this is maybe not a good thing to say. I'm not a photographer first. That's not how I see myself, actually. I think I've always felt like I'm a communicator first. So writing this book recently and the things that I talk about on YouTube, in my case, I actually do think that's the most important thing that I do, is trying to inspire other creatives. That is the first thing. But photography is a close second, and I think that it'll be part of the communication going forward. So if I thought of myself as a photographer first, then I'd be making big mistakes in the way that I'm doing things now. But that said, I do need to make more space for my photography, and I've realized that in the last few years. It does come down to deciding, what are you first? What's the most important thing to you? And then making sure you protect time for that, especially if you're starting out. I think a lot of people get into YouTube because they go, this is how I'm going to become a famous photographer. Now, that's how you become a famous YouTuber. But in terms of the photography space, your photography might really not be respected. I mean, think about it. Like, I think people who watch a YouTube channel like mine go, oh, he's a well-respected photographer. I'm not. I'm well-respected amongst beginners, but that's not a well-respected photographer. It's beginners who hang out on YouTube looking for tips and tricks. But if you go and ask great photographers, oh yeah, Sean Tucker's a great photographer, they'll go like, who? Who is that? No one knows who I am there, because I'm not a great photographer. I've got a lot of work to do and a very long way to go. And when you live in this space, you know that. So if you want to be a great photographer first, protect time to make great images and make that your priority, and do the other stuff on the side. YouTube is marketing at the end of the day. That should be marketing time, but making the work time should be most of what you spend your time on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's the point, to ask yourself that question, and to really define what are your priorities, and they might shift. In the beginning, you might put all your energy in building an audience, and then you grow into something that's your own photography becomes more important, and you shift the focus a little bit, and then you have your audience that is interested in you, that really got to know you, what kind of topics are important to you, and then you can tell that kind of stories to your audience. I mean, they intersect, I think, these two things, right?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, and it's just that balance. Like, what's important to you? What are you aiming at? And ask yourself that the whole time, and then looking at your calendar and work out if the things you say are important are getting the biggest chunks of time. And if not, you've got questions to ask yourself. How are you structuring this thing? Why? Because let's be super honest. The problem with social media and YouTube and Instagram and things like that is the seductive part about that is attention, right? So when we start to get a little bit of attention, we might be tempted to give a lot of time to it because attention feels good. But it's not helping you as an artist in the long run and developing. And you'll regret it years down the road. and the attention doesn't feed you the way you think it does. Some people might look at the numbers I've got on my YouTube channel and think, well, if I had those numbers, I'd be truly happy. I promise you won't, because I'm there and I don't care. I know it doesn't mean that much in terms of the work that I'm making, or the respect you're getting as a photographer in the industry. It doesn't mean that. You become quite attractive to camera brands who want to sell more cameras and use your number to do it. But you know that doesn't mean you're a great photographer. You see through the lie very, very quickly. So what are you building and why? And think long term. Like, what's the stuff that really counts?
We've been talking about that also this morning, about the difference between images that work on social media and images that are dear to you as a photographer. Can you speak on that a little bit? What are the images that you yourself are most proud of? And yeah.
I mean, I think the example I get, what did I say to you earlier? I said, like, I know what images to take on social media that people are impressed with. A contrasty diagonal shadow on a wall. People seem to really like that for some reason. It's very easy to do, though. After a while, you realize it's a trick. It's very easy to do, and I still like doing it because I think, like, when I take those kind of images, I feel like a bit of a graphic designer with a camera, and I absolutely love it. But I also know it's quite easy at this point to do that and not as challenging. And I think I said to you, I found the Panos Instagram account, and I remember finding that account years ago, thinking to myself, oh, this isn't really for me because they're quite boring images. And then the more I grow up and get older and grow as a photographer, I realize, no, that's the kind of photography I want to do, because they're not boring images. They just don't work on social media because there's too much detail and nuance and storytelling going on in those kind of frames that they just don't get picked up when you're quickly flicking through a feed and scrolling past people's lunches and dogs and you need something to grab you. They won't grab you. But if you see that as a beautiful print on a wall or in a double spread in a book that's telling a bigger story, they're way more powerful than a diagonal shadow on a wall. And so I want to start my photography. I want it to start transitioning, and it is already, to more meaningful images that people won't like on social media. See, this is the point I think that I was saying with you, is like, at some point you're going to have to start to choose to kill your own following almost, because you're becoming better. And this is where it's very, very dangerous to think that the numbers attached to what you're doing online are any kind of judge of quality. Because I actually think that the better you get, the less popular it will be in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to social media. When you start to do more interesting, more meaningful work, it's not social media short attention span friendly. So you have to make some serious choices at that point. It's like my friend Josh is a great example. Joshua K. Jackson on Instagram, if you're interested in looking him up. But I look at his work. He is miles ahead of me down the road, doing incredible work. But I think people know him for his older images that were more popular. He's doing much more interesting, much braver, much more challenging photography now, but it's not as social media friendly. And like, I really respect that. The fact that he's like, I know what good is now, and I'm confident in myself enough to make that work, whether people get it or not. I want to be more like that.
Yeah, totally. I agree. You have to, if you become that photographer that caters to an audience that doesn't fit you, or that expects something from you that you are not comfortable with, or that's not work that resonates with you yourself, this is nothing to be in for the long game.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to see. I mean, like, I think I have a bigger Instagram following than Alex Soth. How stupid is that? Like, I'm nothing. I'm not a shadow of Alex Soth. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's an incredible photographer. I'm a baby when it comes to him. So that's why you can't take that stuff seriously. He is making so much more interesting, mature, rich work than I am. The sooner you stop listening to the social media score, the better. The sooner you'll be able to start on the journey to becoming a great photographer and realizing all that stuff is pointless, absolutely pointless.
And you're doing a great job just pointing that out and being that honest about it. And also in your book, I think it's so valuable because it asks exactly that kind of questions that you should ask yourself if you want to be a creative photographer and pursue and make work that really matters to you, and that comes first, and that gets you a long way. I mean, I've read the book a couple of times. I take it up quite frequently and always find something inspiring in there. So it's a great job that you're doing, and thank you very much for doing that kind of work. It's also your YouTube channel. It's always great to watch it, and the ideas that you give out to your audience. One recent video, you touched on a quite current topic, and I think you said something that's like, there's not like a topic that you'd like to get into very, very deep, or like to talk about a lot over the next month or years. But it's artificial intelligence, and I saw it more as a video that you wanted to put out to make your point, to give your opinion on it, and not just as a starting point to open a huge discussion that you're happy to have now. Is that right, or?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you pick up a topic like that, there will be a huge discussion because people have very strong feelings about AI right now, which is fine. But yeah, it is. It's just, I was very clear in the video. It's just my opinion. I don't share the hype, and I'm not as worried as everyone else is, because I've kind of been through those changes with different technologies. You know, I mean, I was a product photographer when the first IKEA catalog came out that was over 75% CGI, computer generated imagery, and I realized, like, okay, well, my photography industry is dead then in the next few years. That's just a reality. But that doesn't mean photography is dead. I think people look at AI and they go, well, it's going to be bad things for photographers. No, it's going to be bad things for some photographers. But there's been way more technologies that have come along that have been bad for photographers, and we've had to, I'm somebody who's had to switch his photography career because of a technological change, and I was able to do that. We're able to do that. That doesn't mean it's not tough, and it's not difficult, and it's not challenging for a lot of people, and it doesn't lead to some sad outcomes. That's all true, and it's all difficult, but it's not the death of photography. It's stop, seriously. Like it's photography is going to be as important going forward in the areas where authenticity matters. You can't have an AI-generated street photograph. You can have an AI-generated image that looks like a street photograph, but it's going to be of a non-real scene. But the reason we love street photography is because we know it's a real human moment. That's why it's valuable to us. That's why it's meaningful and rich to us. If it's not a real human moment, it might be an interesting looking picture. Like, I'm not saying AI is nothing and can't generate something interesting. It might be interesting to look at, but because it's not real, we'll always value it differently, right? And so I think photography will still have that real world mystique to it. It's real light falling on real human beings and real situations and real interactions. That's going to mean more to us always. A real portrait of a loved one will always mean more to us than an AI-generated portrait of a loved one. It will always have a value. It will change some sectors of the photography industry, no doubt, and we'll have to adjust. But I mean, that happens every year somewhere in the world to some group of people, and we don't get left out. We also have to adjust when technology advances.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that there's always going to be value for real experiences, and in that sense, it's not going to change that much. There's some industries, of course, where you can, if you're profit-driven or thinking a company from that standpoint, it's also, if you can generate images via AI, of course you do it, and you not pay a photographer to do the same kind of work. But I think, one of the biggest challenges will be when it comes to photojournalism and reportage, to distinguish which images were AI generated, or if that creeps into photojournalism at some point. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think it's a problem because it's been a problem for so long, right? I mean, we've had Photoshop for 30 years now, and we've had the ability to fake imagery in journalism for 30 years. But we've got very, very strict rules about you cannot post manipulated or doctored images and pretend they're journalism. You're not allowed to do that. And any photographer who does that is fired. And any publication that says they're journalistic, that publishes those images, we don't buy their things and their company folds. So we've had CGI that could do the same. We've now got AI that could do the same. We've got the rules in place already. So the problem isn't, are we going to allow that or not? Because we've never allowed that. We've always been really, really clear. We're not going to change the rules for AI. The rules stay the same, right? I think the problem then becomes detecting the images that have been faked or aren't real. But I'm not that worried about that either, because a skilled Photoshop operator, we still know how to detect that. Not just in looking at the image, although that's part of it, but also we have things by looking at the digital file where we can see things have been manipulated. There's ways to detect that. And with AI, it's very new, right? But we've already got systems to detect it. So, for example, ChatGPT, students have been using ChatGPT to generate assignments, right? So they've already developed technology, software, that can identify AI-generated text, and it's using AI. So now we're using AI to catch AI, right? So as fast as that technology develops, I think we'll also be developing technology that can detect AI-generated work. And I don't think it's going to be different for images. I think we're going to be able to run images through programs that can pick up what's real and what's not real in how that file was put together. So I don't think it's a problem. I've heard the same. Like when I posted this video, I had a lot of people, but they're going to use AI to generate images and spread misinformation. I'm sure people will do that. I have no doubt people will do that, but people have been doing that with Photoshop for years. But when it comes to trusted journalistic outlets, I still haven't seen a single example of where somewhere's got away with that without repercussions in the last 30 years with Photoshop or in the last 10 years with CGI. So why does this new technology mean it's suddenly going to start happening more? I don't think it will. And if it does, we'll catch it. So I think we're going to be okay. I think where it does affect us is, as individuals, we're going to have to be even more discerning about what we see out there and ask ourselves probing questions about, is what I'm seeing real? But that's not brand new either. We've had to do that with Photoshop for 30 years too, because we've been fooled, right? So I think being more discerning is a good thing. Yes, it's always been difficult to tell what's real and what's not, so it's good to have a healthy skepticism. But I think the proper journalistic outlets have their rules in place, is my guess.
You pointed that out. There's two sides to it. There's the media outlets putting out the content and the photos that have to make sure that they are authentic. And then there's the consumer side that also has the responsibility maybe to take a few more seconds to look at a piece of news, to look at a photo and to assess them and not to react out of an impulse and make it a big thing. How do you see that?
Yeah, because I think we can't pretend that AI is the first time we've had to do this. I think we've known for a long time, and this isn't just about photography. This is about written journalism as well, right? This is about when there's so much spread of misinformation. People can write anything they want, let alone Photoshop whatever they want to try and lie about something they think is happening. We know now, we should know by now, that we can't take everything we read on a Facebook post or on a blog as fact. We have to ask ourselves harder questions than that. It's lazy to do that. Oh, I found an opinion that agrees with me. I'm just going to start spreading this around because it agrees with the thing I already thought. We should challenge ourselves. Is this person giving me facts, or are they giving me anecdotes, or are they just outright lying to me? Like what's really going on? I think it's good we wake up now and start asking ourselves, no matter where we get our information from, is this trustworthy? It's hard. It's no doubt it's difficult to tell, and sometimes it's difficult to work out what's real and what's not. But the fact that we're asking ourselves, I think, is a really good and healthy thing, which will cover us for AI, right? Because it means that we don't take everything we see at face value. We question, where did it come from? How was it made? What did the person who made it think? What do they want me to think? All good questions to ask.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see in the coming month now, no, with maybe one of the most important things with the upcoming elections next year in the United States, or wherever important decisions are about to take place. What kind of role does AI play there? And to see if there are checks and balance in place, and how, if this is a new quality now with the AI being more sophisticated, and if it's has the quality of fooling us even better than we've been fooled before. So it's going to be very interesting to see in the coming month, I think, to see that in real time, or in the real world. What are your thoughts? Are you a little bit afraid that not enough people take the time to really make that thorough assessment of information?
Well, I'm worried, but not because of AI. I'm worried because that's how it is already. Even before AI came around, that. If there was no AI now, I'd still be as worried, because it's the same it's a human problem, not an AI problem. AI just is another tool that complicates things. But the problem isn't AI. The problem is that we don't question what we see or hear enough, right? And that's concerning to me. I wish people would question more and seek out answers for themselves. And I understand why they don't, because it's time consuming, right? And we often just take the lazy soundbite. It's easier to do and then yell about it with our friends and then not think about anything else. I wish people question more for themselves. But my worry is a human worry, not an AI worry. AI is just the tool.
Yeah. There have been experiments to see what kind of checks are in place already. Magnum photographer Jonas Bendixen published a book which was all along fake, and he at some point he got really afraid that he was asking, so when do I get caught? Finally, it's so obvious, but nobody realized what was behind his work, and other photographers entering competitions with AI photos and winning prizes. So there is signs that we have to even pay more attention to that on all sides, consumer sides, media outlets. And something very interesting I saw the other day. I don't remember the name of the photographer, but I linked to that in the show notes. It's an article about a project that a photographer did with images generated with Midjourney on Cubans taking a boat from Cuba to the United States. You saw that? Okay, great. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's like, it blurs the lines of photojournalism and AI a little bit. Like to use images, AI-generated images as illustrations. The project that we are referring to is by Magnum photographer Michael Christopher Brown. It's called 90 Miles, and I'll link to it in the show notes.
So yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? But I saw those images and I thought, they're not trying to pretend these are photographs. It's clear that it's AI. But it is like an illustrator going to work and saying, I want to tell a story, but I want to give you visuals with it as well. I think what we just have to keep in mind is that the images that they're generating with AI, and then probably having to edit in Photoshop at this stage, because no straight out of AI image is very good at the moment. It's always got weird fingers and eyes all over the place. So you have to remember that it's still the artist and the AI collaborating together to create a piece that is the artist's perception with their nuance or their opinions or prejudices involved as well. Like, it's not a photograph. It's not, even a photographer could, in the way that they frame, put their own prejudice in as well. Let's not mistake that. But as art that illustrates, there's nothing wrong with that for me. It's just the same as an illustrator drawing a picture to go with an article. As long as we're honest about what it is, as long as we're not trying to pretend as this technology gets better and better, this is a photograph I took, because that then becomes a problem. That's an integrity issue for me. But if you're like, well, I generated this in AI to describe what I know happens but couldn't get access to, okay, you're honest about it, you're okay. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. Yeah, used in that way, it might even be a new powerful tool in the toolkit of every storyteller. I mean, if you could generate these images that you weren't able to generate with your own camera because you weren't there, or maybe you were in that situation but didn't have your camera on it, and then recreate from your memory illustrations of the situations, there's some possibilities in there as well.
Yeah. And morally, for me, there's nothing wrong with that. It is like you going to. I mean, if you said to somebody, "Listen, I went to the Amazon. I was hanging out there, and we were in this really interesting village, and I saw, but I didn't feel comfortable pulling my camera out. But I'm an incredible artist. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to sketch the scene that I saw and show you the sketches." You'd be like, "That's amazing! Oh, brilliant! Well done." So now we're using AI to do that. Yes, it's a lazier tool. It doesn't take nearly as much skill, but you're still using a tool that's available to you to show me what you saw. I'm all right with that. Just be honest about what it is. And I think an interesting point on that maybe is how much credit you can take. Because is it your art or is it the AI's art? Or is it someone else's art that it's stealing and morphing a little bit to give it to you? That's an interesting conversation to have. Like, what is this art? I was talking to my friend Jeffrey about this, and when we were saying that it's more like because we talk about AI artists now, right? Who come up with the perfect string of prompts to produce an image, but actually it's more like you sitting down with a street artist and saying, "Hey, draw me this, like draw a little bit of this," and like you describing something to an artist that produces something. Who gets to take credit for that art? You who described it or the artist who drew it? It's probably more the artist, right? So in this case, I think it's the computer's art that we're giving it the right descriptions for to create. So the credit goes to the AI, and then you have to ask, where did the AI get the prompts for that? If it pulled too specifically from one person's work, then now there's a plagiarism issue potentially, right? Depending on what AI is pulling from or scraping in terms of the internet. Those questions are good questions to ask. I don't have answers for that, but I mean that's where we should be looking, I think.
There's these lawsuits right now going on, like if photographers are should get paid for their if their images are used to feed into AI and for AI to learn from them. What's your opinion on that?
I don't know. I think I mean it would be a clear-cut case if a company took one of my images and used it on a billboard. I can sue them because they are making money directly off my imagery, and they shouldn't. But my images are stolen online very often by other photographers who use them in different things, or they don't necessarily make money from it, but they turn it into something else and use it. It's not worth my time to sue them. I'm not going to make any money off it because they're not making any money off it. Is it unethical? Yeah, it's definitely unethical. But I don't really have a legal recourse. So I'm not sure. And who are we going to sue, right? Are we going to sue the people who made AI? Because they're just going to go, well, we don't make the individual decisions, the AI does. Are we going to sue AI? AI is not coming to court. So who are you going after? I think there's an ethical problem at the middle of it. I have no idea how that gets solved. That's a difficult one. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets really complicated. And I personally have asked myself the question as well. But then I got to think that what AI is doing is it takes from like billions and billions of photos, information that like one single image is just a drop in the ocean. And in fact, we as artists have always done that. Like we take in information ourselves and feed our head, our thoughts with information, like not much different of what AI is doing, but in an analog way or whatever, physical way. So I don't think, I mean, it's not the most important discussion that we should be having about this.
Yeah, I agree. I'm exactly the same as you. I think in most cases AI is drawing from so many influences and making an amalgam that you can't claim it's your work. And I think the more AI develops, the more and more that will be true. It will be pulling from billions of sources and pulling it together in a way that you can't even see your piece in there individually. I think where people kicked off is there were instances where they could actually see a signature that had been blurred out at the bottom, in which case then you can track back and go, hey, this was mine. Then you can see where it's pulling from. I think if AI can disguise where it's pulling from, because it's pulling from so many sources. Like you say, how is that different from an artist being influenced by tons of other artists? I think at that point you lose your ability to try and take AI to court, like it's, yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. Like it feels that well, it's been a long time coming, but personally, I have just recently woken up to the whole what it might all imply, this whole AI thing. So, but I'm really closely watching it now, and well, it's going to be interesting to see where it all goes in the future. But as you said, I think it's our responsibility to learn how to use these new tools, be alert and be discerning about the information we get, and you can't always blame some artificial intelligence or others if you get fooled. I mean, you have to be take responsibility for your own thoughts and what kind of information you take in. So I think it's also always important to remind people of that.
I'm big on personal responsibility. Like, I think the big thing about the fear of spreading misinformation is not a problem with the tools, it's a problem with the people who don't ask themselves harder questions and take responsibility. And unfortunately, we know that there are big sections of every population that don't take responsibility and just take the lazy answers. But that's a problem to solve with people, not to close down AI, because whatever technology is in its place, or even if we just go back to Photoshop, we've still got the same problem. The problem has to get solved, not destroy innovation.
Yeah, interesting topics, but now shifting away from artificial worlds and realities back to real life. Tonight you have your talk here in Cologne, and then you move on to Hamburg, a place where I'm from. You've been to Hamburg before. What's your impression, or what was your impression of Hamburg as a city?
It's great. I mean, I honestly scratched the surface because I was only there a couple of days. I think it was 2019. It's a great city. I especially would love, on a day with the lights out, which I hear is quite rare in Hamburg, but I would love to spend time down by the sort of the kind of tall brick warehouses down by the waterfronts. I think there's some amazing images to get made down there. I mean, I don't know nearly enough, but I'd definitely like to spend more time there.
Yeah, you have one afternoon where you're going on a photo walk.
Yeah, probably. I'm not even sure of the schedule, actually, of what's going on, but I believe we're doing a photo walk on the Saturday afternoon. Yeah. Should be good. Hope, fingers crossed for light. That's right.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. If we get light, then it's great. Hamburg, as you mentioned, has lots of glass, and when the light really hits, you get beautiful reflections, and you can do amazing stuff there. But most of the time, it's just cloudy, rainy. So, just keep our fingers crossed. Get good weather there. Jean, we talked a lot about projects and future things on your head. Are there any other questions that are on your mind at the moment? Something that you are thinking about, whatever, photography related or in any other way?
I could feel there's like a big shift going on right now. I think maybe that's true for a lot of people. And I think I'm just trying to work out how to reprioritize everything together. So between the YouTube videos, which I backed off again to one a month, where I was doing 2 a month for a long time, to create more space for the photography, to try and do longer term projects, but then also to work out how to build other things in now. I mean, we talked, like I've had this idea for a kind of short, limited series podcast thing that's narrative, something totally different. There's nothing to do with what I do now. Just trying different expressions of art or creativity, I think, is important now, because I don't want to get stuck in a rut of doing one thing. I always want to be learning a new thing, and I'll be coming to you for advice on how to do podcasting. So that kind of thing would be good. I'm also studying counseling at the moment to be a therapist in the next 3 or 4 years down the road, just as another career option, something I do. We've been running creative retreats as well. I feel like if you just stay open and respond to the things that interest you, even if they don't fit together perfectly now, although I can see the links, hopefully you can bring them together down the road. So I'm just trying to make sure that on the side of the job that I do that pays the bills, I'm building in things that might be the future. And maybe they're not. Maybe some of them will be dead ends, and that's okay as well. You still learn, right? But I feel like there's a lot of experimenting with different things and trying different mixes of things now to work out what the next season of my life looks like, which I don't have answers for. I'm trying to just stay open to what comes next.
Yeah. So I think the best way to approach it and to go about it. And all the best of luck for that endeavor and for whatever you might tackle next. And we'll keep following that on your YouTube channel. And thank you very much for taking the time for this interview. It's been a pleasure getting to know you in person as well. And hopefully we'll do it again at some other time.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Well, this was my conversation with Sean Tucker. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you listened to this episode shortly after it was released, then you have the chance to meet up with Sean in Vienna. He's going to be there on September the 6th at 7 p.m. at the Thalia bookstore. For more information, go to Sean's website at seantucker.com. Thanks for listening, and until next time.